Welcome back to the discussion Identity Access Management, sponsored by SailPoint on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guest today is Darren Rolls, Chief Technology and Chief Information Security Officer, SailPoint. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. Earlier in the discussion, we talked about identity management. And when I think about identities, I think of walking into a building, maybe having to show some kind of identification to a security guard there. Many times it's a smart card. Well, is a smart card the smart answer here in 2017?
That's a very good question. Obviously, it's one that in federal, there's been a significant focus on over the years. Smart card and PIV has been a big push and a big investment. And of course, it's still relevant. Strong authentication is still the critical first step in making sure that the right people have the right access. I think as we've seen through the investment that the CDM program has put in place for federal agencies, we're widening the net now to go much further than just strong authentication, and to put in place the governance of access, and to truly understand who that person is via virtue of that strong authentication, and then be able to extend that out into what they should have access to understand all the systems that they need to gain access to, and what it means to have that access. It's very frequently disconnected, the authentication from the data. And so I think joining those things back together is a critical part of what we do in governance, but you can't do any of it without strong authentication. So it's still extremely relevant, yeah.
Earlier this morning, I sat down with Dr. Steve Bennett, a PhD from Stanford in advanced math, and he's working for a big analytic company in town here. And we talked about anomalies and detection and big data, and we stumbled on identity management. And he said, well, the key here is identity resolution. And it kind of, this is really what you're doing is like, okay, so someone's out there. Oh, really? Let's focus on exactly who's there and what does he have access to. So the resolution seems to resonate with me.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you had that conversation, because that's one of the key things that we've been advocating, both in not just in our product, but in our community and in standards as well. We call it identity context. What that really means is not just understanding who somebody is, but understanding the roles and positional access that they should have pertinent to a particular set of tasks, being able to say the accounts that they have, and being able to understand the data that they've accessed with those accounts. In order for us to address the urgent need for increased security that I think we're now seeing by virtue of the vulnerabilities and attacks that we talked about earlier, when we realize that just prevention is not enough, just strong authentication, which can be done through preventing access. We have to really understand people and understand access. And that's what I think the resolution is. Take a piece of data and be able to say, who has access to this piece of data? Flip it the other way around and say, here's a person, show me all the things they can access. That resolution, if you like, is now seen by most as a critical tenant, critical capability in security of the future, for sure.
Joe Smith walks in, he's Joe Smith, we know it, but what's that got to do with identity management? And you need a tool to allow you to identify what roles he can take. And by the way, that may change over time. Just basic authentication does not take into account that as of July 1st, certain things are accessible, things aren't. Sure. And so the tools allow you to control that with a little bit more accuracy, I would think.
Right, exactly. And this term mover, we mentioned earlier, joiner, mover, lever. A move turns out to be a very, very complex thing to actually instrument, right? I need to, you have a set of access, something's changed in your roles, your capabilities, what you're being asked to do by an organization, and we need to adjust that access to fit the new model. It means adding some things, taking some things away, and leaving some things behind, as it were. And so often a move is as you've highlighted, an incredibly complicated process. And if we don't do that correctly, we leave behind privileges that someone shouldn't have. We leave vulnerability. And these are, as I said earlier, the things that are most definitely the point of first attack.
Especially with privileged accounts, I would think. Let me ask you a question here. So can you explain how identity and entitlement management compares to or works with privileged account management as part of an insider threat protection program?
Yeah, that's a very good question again. I think we often use this term in our industry and in our particular corner of that industry of entitlement. And what an entitlement really represents is it's a permission. It's an abstract term for something, an access point, which may be an Active Directory account. It could be a group you're a membership of. It could be a folder that you have access to. So those particular things we refer to as entitlements. Now, managing the life cycle of the entitlement is that joiner, mover, leaver that we referred to earlier. So I think an entitlement is really a complex word for a permission within a system. If that kind of answers what you meant.
Yeah, yeah. I come from the world of software, arguing with software developers and talking about hot sauce. That's my background. And they talk about the software development life cycle. And a lot of times they try to project what's going to happen when a transition takes place. And I think that's what we just stumbled on here is many times these changes, the transitions, may have unintended consequences, especially for someone's email address that may or may not continue or be discontinued or be vulnerable to someone attacking.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think we've now come to realize that we have to have the whole picture for access for an individual. For a system. The truth is, after maybe 50 years of computing here, maybe the 25 years certainly that I've been in this industry, nothing's really changed, right? The security systems and authorization systems themselves haven't really changed much.
Role-based access is a 25-year-old term.
Absolutely it is. And what did it say? Let's give the right people the right access to the right things. And we're really still grappling with those same problems. Very, very basic principles to some degree.
And so just merely authenticating someone, even if it's two-factor authentication, that the authenticate, you can do 100 different factors, but that's not the point at all. It's access, privilege, and changing access that can happen unexpectedly or part of policy.
Right. Exactly. I mean, really, if you think about it, authentication is binary. Right? It's a decision that's made. You present a credential and I accept that credential or I don't. That's really what happens with authentication. I wouldn't say it's sophisticated, but it's actually quite simple. Behind that sits authorization. And I think that's what identity governance really stands for, is the idea of understanding those authorization models, understanding the complexity that's in and making them manageable.
Great. We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Darren Rolls, Chief Technology and Chief Information Security Officer, SailPoint. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion Identity Access Management, sponsored by SailPoint on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.